Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. My name is Paul Allen, and I am going to be doing a review of Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 1. Now, those of you who know me personally know that I am a massive Cobra Kai fan. I love the Karate Kid franchise. I think that it is genuinely one of the greatest franchises that we have been blessed with in cinema. So whenever I got into Cobra Kai, which it's funny because I'm not like the majority of fans that have been watching either since the beginning or since even the original Karate Kid. I got into Cobra Kai initially back in late 2021. It was just before season 4 came out, and the moment that I watched episode 1, I was hooked. Now I've always been a fan of the Karate Kid. It was one of my favorite movies whenever I was a kid, and I always loved it. I didn't realize that Cobra Kai was a thing until pretty much the night I watched it. And I remember too, whenever I watched it, and I got through I think about half of season 1 in one night while I was at work, because at that point I worked night shift, and I called my mom, and I was like, we have to binge watch this together. And so we did, and she fell in love with it too. She was Team Cobra Kai all the way. But then we got to count down to season 4. We watched season 4 together, and unfortunately she passed away before season 5 came out. And, it's just one of those really cool things. We were able to watch seasons 1 through 4 together, and being able to watch season 5 and now season 6, part 1 to season 6. I think back fondly to those memories, and that's what I love about cinema, is that it gives you memories with your loved ones, and I think that it's something that I think all of us know, but I think it's something that is still underappreciated today. But that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into my review of Part 1 of Season 6 of Cobra Kai. I do want to warn you, this will have spoilers. So if you're not a fan of spoilers, this is your heads up to tune out. So I'm going to review each episode individually. Now, there's only 5 episodes in part 1, and it was released actually just before my birthday. It was July 18th, I believe it was. So happy birthday to me. But episode 1 was called Peacetime in the Valley. Now, this episode did a very good job of kind of establishing what our characters are up to now that Terry Silver has been defeated. And I really love being able to have that insight as to how they're reacting. Is there still kind of that sense of unease? And it's clear that some of the characters still have a little bit of tension. The relationships between the characters, even though the antagonizing factor has been resolved, there's still tension between some of the characters. And I like that. It's realistic. We get to see Johnny and Daniel start to really train the students for the Sekai Taikai. And it's just such a cool dynamic. One of my favorite aspects of this episode is they take Johnny and they put him in a situation where, honestly, you might think, oh, he's about to get lured back into Cobra Kai. At least if you're not as familiar with the story, it might seem that way. He gets a text that tells him to quote unquote meet me in Coyote Creek. And of course, that is where Johnny and John Kreese trained the students in season 2. And Johnny asks, "Who is this?" and only gets the response, "Cobra Kai never dies." I did not think that this was John Kreese. I know that some people may have, but it seemed a little too out of character for Kreese. So Johnny goes, and he is met by Stingray, who has made his own pseudo dojo called Cobra Kai, and he's playing lessons from John Kreese, which is hilarious. But he has this moment with Johnny, which is actually quite powerful, where he tells Johnny what Johnny means to him and how Johnny helped him. And I thought that was a very moving moment, really, because mentors, I've mentored a few people, and it doesn't always hit us until a pupil says, "This is how you've impacted me." And I just thought that was really cool to see. This gives Johnny the option to either restart Cobra Kai on his own and, as Stingray puts it, make it his legacy, or he can continue with Daniel. Now, at the same time that Johnny is having this dilemma, Daniel is talking to Chosen, because the whole story between them for this episode is how they can't agree on a dojo name. They have several funny moments debating the name. I thought it was quite hilarious, actually. But Daniel and Chosen are talking, and at first they don't want to concede. They want it to be Miyagi-Do. They want to honor that legacy. Johnny wants it to be Eagle Fang. Or, in one funny moment, he says Eagle Do Fang, which, that's just classic Johnny. But the cool moment here is Johnny comes back to the dojo and he actually concedes. He agrees that the dojo should be called Miyagi-Do because Cobra Kai is John Kreese's legacy and he wants no part of that. So Johnny is in Miyagi-Do officially. What the fuck? I thought that was amazing storytelling, and it really does make sense because of the two of Johnny and Daniel. Johnny is the one who has changed the most. Daniel hasn't really changed. He hasn't really truly embraced any part of Johnny's style of karate. On the contrast, you can see that transformation in Johnny. You can see that he uses more of Miyagi-Do now than he did in previous seasons. Frankly, at first he didn't. So I thought that was really cool. I thought it was excellent storytelling. Perhaps one of my favorite moments is the college fight. That scene was absolutely incredible. Never in a million years, whenever you watch season 1, did you think Kyler and Miguel would team up in a fight. That was really cool. I love this storytelling. It's interesting too that they went the route of Kyler. Now, he's gone from being the bully to he's being bullied. I thought that was an interesting touch. But the closing shot is John Kreese in, I believe it's South Korea, with the Cobra Kai. He shows up and he is ready to work with Sensei Kim. Um, Unsurprising. I figured that was where they were going to go with Kreese. I didn't expect it to be at the end of episode 1, though. I didn't really know how involved that Kreese would be in part 1 of season 6. Episode 2 is really his episode. I mean, obviously, it goes back and forth between Kreese and Daniel and Johnny, but it really is Kreese's episode. The most shocking moment of this episode, Master Kim is alive. This dude has to be 110 fucking years old. That blew my mind. I was very, very impressed with that. The fact that they actually brought Master Kim into this episode and seeing that dynamic, like, you know, you see John Kreese and you look at him as a sensei. Even if he's not a sensei that you would be under, you still look at him as, okay, he's Sensei Kreese. You don't think, who is his sensei? Now we see his sensei, and I thought that was really, really cool. I don't know how realistic it is, just because of how old that Master Kim would have to be. I'm not saying that it's realistic, and the arguments of that are entirely justifiable. I just personally really enjoyed that. Really, though, the story of this episode is Kreese needing to prove his worth to include Cobra Kai in the Sekai Taikai. Now, whenever I say that the cave scenes are some of my favorite in the season, like, I really genuinely enjoy these scenes. Kreese goes in. His task is to retrieve a knife that Master Kim says he dropped whenever he was fighting off an ambush decades ago. And that is Kreese's task, retrieve the knife. So he goes in and he sees the knife, but there is a white cobra that is guarding it. I really liked this metaphor. And the reason being is because Kreese has to face the cobra in order to get his what he's after, the knife. And I felt like it was kind of a metaphor in the fact that we saw in season 4 at the end, Kreese seemed to almost be going against the lessons of Cobra Kai with the tournament. And I found that fascinating, and I really thought they were going to go with him not necessarily becoming a good guy, but I thought that they were going to at least make him more of an anti-hero. Nevertheless, I felt like that this was showing him having to face the Cobra Kai lessons in order to get what he wants, which is to be in the Sekai Taikai, to be a sensei in the Sekai Taikai. So Kreese gets bit by the cobra, and he starts to hallucinate. He hallucinates his younger self. He hallucinates a young Terry Silver. I almost expected adult Terry Silver to show up as well. Thomas Ian Griffith. I almost expected to see him. We did not. But then he sees Johnny in Cobra Kai gi. And there is a fight between Kreese and the hallucination of Johnny. And this is where we see Kreese 100% go back to his old ways, because he vows that he will no longer show Johnny mercy. Now, I think that will be put to the test later. But Kreese wins this fight, and then he goes, and it's revealed later in this process, he kills the Cobra. But he returns with the knife, and then he drops the head of the Cobra. And Master Kim gives his blessing for Kreese to not only use Cobra Kai's name in the Sekai Taikai, but train his students. And that's what we get into a lot more in episode 3. But episode 2 was very solid. I liked how it explored the psyche of John Kreese a little bit more. I liked that we saw Master Kim. And overall, I really, really enjoyed these first 2 episodes. We go into episode 3. Like I said, we see John Kreese actually training these students. Now, the one that is more arrogant and disobedient is the one that Kreese seems to hone in on. He sees that he can kind of manipulate this kid into being the fighter that can win the Sekai Taikai. So we see that transition throughout the episode. But the most fascinating part of episode 3 is we get a secret revealed from Mr. Miyagi. Now, this was revealed at the end of the trailer. We saw that they were going to find a hidden chest at Mr. Miyagi's house. And of course, they open it while they're there, but we don't see what's in it in the trailer. I thought this was going to be one of the last shots of episode 5. I was wrong. It is one of the main focal points of episode 3. Now, I will say, as far as the surprise here, part of me is a little underwhelmed, but I don't disagree with it necessarily. The surprise is we see some boxing gloves and we see newspaper clippings, one of which talks about an armed robbery and a suspect who identified as Miyagi but a different first name. So they as in Daniel, Chosen, and Amanda, they go to this boxing gym that is named in the article to see if they can get any information as to why in the world Miyagi was there. And they find out 2 things. They find out that Miyagi, he was indeed there, and he did indeed commit the robbery. Now, this causes a lot of problems for Daniel. His world is turned upside down because he looks at Miyagi as a saint, essentially. And that really fucks with Daniel throughout the rest of the season so far. So we'll get into that more at the end of episode 5, though, as to why, even though most of this is underwhelming, why I still agree with the surprise. Episode 4. To close out episode 3. The tournament location was revealed, which, of course, there was a lot of speculation amongst the students, and it ends up that it's in Spain, which is really cool. Nice new setting for the show. But episode 4, because they have to narrow it down to 6 competitors. And episode 4 sees Mike Barnes, because Johnny and Daniel can't agree on who the six should be, they ask Mike Barnes to come in and run some tests on the students. And the whole episode is just absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed Mike Barnes' um, involvement in it, because that's one thing about season 5 is, he had a few scenes in a couple of different episodes, and that was really it. A lot of people felt like he should be in it more. And I will say, as of now, he's only in episode 4. I do think that we'll get some more of Mike later in the season, but as of now, he's only in 4. But he's in it a lot. Like I'd say he's a supporting lead character in episode 4, which is nice. There's a lot of conflict because Devin desperately wants to be able to go. Devin Lee, who's of course one of Johnny's first students under Eagle Fang. She wants to go and compete in the Sekai Taikai. But it seems that Mike Barnes doesn't really pay a lot of attention to her in the testing. So we see that conflict with Devin, and to an extent with Johnny too, because of course Johnny wants her to be there. And so after the testing is done, Johnny convinces Mike Barnes to reevaluate his scores and consider offering another chance. So that's exactly what happens. They go and they play a form of capture the flag with the 4 kind of questionables as to who would be there and who would not be, which was Devin, Kenny, Hawk, and Dimitri. Which is interesting because you would think that Hawk would have been a shoo-in to be in the Sekai Taikai. But that's how the cookie crumbles in Mike Barnes' testing. So they're the 4 that have to find the flag. Now there's 2 flags, and if 2 people find a flag at the same time, they have to fight for it. So we see Devin chasing Kenny, but at the same time we see one of the other kids, one of the other students, we see him ask where his laxatives are. And then we see that Kenny is in trouble. So Kenny runs back and gets in a porta potty. Not in time, though. He does not make it. And Devin returns with the flag. But then you can see, like, she doesn't really feel right about what she did. And it's pretty damn evident that it was her. Then we see one of the most heartbreaking scenes of the season so far with Hawk and Dimitri, who have had a little bit of a fallout because Hawk wants to explore his options while Dimitri wants to go to MIT, as they both agreed, apparently for years. So they have a fight over the final flag. And the expectation here is for Hawk to take it. But he doesn't. Dimitri actually wins the flag. So you have Robbie, you have Miguel, you have Sam, and you have Tori. Now you've got Devin and Dimitri going for the Sekai Taikai. Which, of course, Robbie and Miguel and Sam and Tori were absolute shoo-ins. You know that they were going to be there. this was a little bit shocking, truthfully, that they went this route. I did expect Devin to go, but I was curious if they were going to go the route of Kenny or even Anthony going instead of Devin. So I was very surprised that the final two were Devin and Dimitri. I think it's amazing though. I think that Dimitri will go a lot farther in the Sekai Taikai. Um, Nevertheless, we get into episode 5, which is where we see the debate start about who's going to be the team captains. Has to be one male, one female. So, obviously, this is going to be between Robbie and Miguel and Sam and Tori. I will say, somehow, I feel like that both are going to end up fighting each other again in the Sekai Taikai. And I'll explain why here in a few minutes. This is Tori's episode. And I'm going to say right now, Peyton List better win awards for her performance. This episode was easily Peyton List's best acting that I have ever seen. So this is where a lot of the major spoilers are going to kick in. Tori's mom dies in this episode. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. She remains absent from the training throughout most of this episode. As a result, of course. So we get down to the fights between Robbie and Miguel and Sam and Tori. We get down to that. And my biggest prediction with the Sekai Taikai was that Robbie was going to win the whole thing. I have felt as if Robbie's story was that, he's been in second place throughout the entire series so far. He needs this win more than Miguel. You can fight me on that if you want. I'm not saying Miguel doesn't need it, but I feel like that it makes the most sense for Robbie's character. And the reason that I predicted Robbie to win this fight whenever I knew it was happening was because the team captain of the two final teams will fight in the end of the Sekai Taikai to declare the winner. And I can tell you exactly who I think that the two final people will be. I can tell you also who I think will be close to the finals. I'll get to that in a minute. Robbie barely won this fight. He didn't get a single point until Tori finally showed up, and then he cleaned house. He was down 2-0, and then Tori shows up, and that gives him his motivation, and he gets the 3 points to beat Miguel. So then we see Sam and Tori fight. And Tori is, of course, highly emotional and is fighting almost a little bit dirty here, which takes Sam by surprise, as well as Johnny and Daniel. So, this fight was absolutely phenomenal, even though we didn't get the full fight. And the reason for that was because during it, Amanda gets a phone call from the hospital, and they tell her that Tori's mom has passed. Now, it's fascinating that the hospital would call Amanda, Daniel's wife. the story between them has always been that Amanda was kind of almost like a motherly figure to Tori, because of course Tori has had to take care of her mother, and so Amanda was kind of that uh, figure for her to a certain extent. So I feel like even though we never see Tori list Amanda, I think that's what happened. Is Tori listed Amanda as a contact, and so that's why they called her. But they tell Amanda, and then Amanda tells Daniel they need to stop the fight. And so, right as Tori is about to throw what is sure to be a very damaging punch that would have gotten her a point, Daniel grabs her fist and says the fight is over. This, of course, upsets Johnny because Johnny doesn't yet know what's going on. And there's that tension where Daniel and Johnny are kind of arguing about it. And Johnny is asking why they have to stop the fight. And then Tori, oh my goodness, this, like I said, some of Peyton List's best acting. She reveals to them and the other students that her mom died and gives this very emotional, not necessarily a speech, but she talks about how she has to do this for her. And I've seen this now 3 times. I've rewatched it. And it is so highly emotional. You watch it and it will make you cry. And they, of course, don't let her fight. Now, Johnny is against this. He wants her to fight because he knows that she's just trying to work through it. And this is what she needs to do in order to work through it in that moment. Daniel, of course, doesn't let her fight, and she ends up storming off and saying she's done. Which means that we have a 6th spot open for Miyagi-Do at the Sekai Taikai. Daniel and Johnny have a fight, and Johnny says he's going to help him coach for the Sekai Taikai, and then he's done. And they're done. Which I'm going to call bullshit. I do not think that will be the end of Daniel and Johnny. They've had too much character development over 6 seasons, or over 5 seasons so far, to call it quits now. But they end up choosing Hawk. No surprise at all that Hawk ends up going in the Sekai Taikai. Now, as far as who the final 2 will be in the Sekai Taikai, the obvious story here is that it's going to come down to Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai. That's the obvious story. I believe that they're going to pick Quan from Cobra Kai to be the team captain on the male side. And I think that it will be Quan versus Robbie. And it's fascinating, too, because Quan reminds me of a more aggressive Robbie from Season 4. So that will be a very interesting fight. Now, for Cobra Kai, the biggest shock here. So, episode 5 ends whenever they arrive at the Sekai Taikai and they're taking their spot. They, as in Miyagi-Do, they take their spot on the outside of the mat and they're looking around. They see all these other countries represented. And then they see Cobra Kai walk in. This probably did not surprise them that Cobra Kai would appear. But what did surprise them, we see the 2 head students, and then we see John Kreese walk up. The look of absolute horror on Daniel's face and shock on Johnny's face was hilarious. They were genuinely surprised that Kreese showed up. And you have to beg the question, too. If Kreese is a fugitive. How was he able to get to Spain? So there's a lot of questions there. And I wonder if it plays into a storyline with Terry Silver. I'll get to that theory in a minute. But then the biggest shock of this, because we only see the 2 Cobra Kai students, and then we see someone else walking up behind Kreese, and it's Tori. She left Miyagi-Do to go back to Cobra Kai. And I'm just going to say this. Perfect storytelling. Tori is in a place now where she is going to go the more aggressive route, and that's not going to work with Miyagi-Do. So I believe, just like we have Robbie and Quan in the finals, that's my prediction. I believe that we will see Sam and Tori in the finals. Now, if Robbie does defeat Quan, I think that Tori will beat Sam. It is just my assumption. Assuming it's 2 one-on-one matches like before. But this episode, the closing at the Sekai Taikai, absolutely incredible. I've seen one complaint with this part of season 6 that it was too slow. I actually disagree. I feel like it was actually a little too fast. I feel like that we jumped to the Sekai Taikai really quickly. I did not expect that until at least episode 7, whenever we found out we were getting 15 episodes. So I felt like it was a little fast-paced, but I think that will overall work to our advantage, because I believe that the entirety of Part 2, which comes out in November, I believe the entirety of Part 2 will be the Sekai Taikai. I believe that it will be at least 4.5 episodes, and then we may see them get back to the States at the end of episode 10, but I really do think that we're going to see the Sekai Taikai in the large majority of Part 2. I think that will be relatively fast-paced, and then I think the last 5 episodes are going to be just tying up all of the storylines that we've seen. I think that we may see Kumiko again. I think that we very well may see Terry Silver. I have a prediction that we will see Terry Silver at the Sekai Taikai. I think that he will be possibly announced as a sponsor. Maybe he's bought his way out of prison and the the characters don't know, and he's now a sponsor of the Sekai Taikai. He may just be there in attendance. Maybe he pays off a ref. I do think that we very well could see Terry Silver in the Sekai Taikai somehow. I also think that he may play a part in the last 5 episodes, but I'm curious as to what his story will be, because they really could go one of 2 ways with it. They could either keep him in jail, which I think is possible, but in my opinion, a little bit boring. But they could also go not necessarily a redemption arc, but maybe he softens up a little bit while he's in jail. And the reason that I say that is because when he's reintroduced in Cobra Kai in season 4, he's not the same Terry Silver that we saw in the Karate Kid 3. He has left that behind, and he's made a new life. John Kreese manipulates him and gets him back in, and that ultimately leads to Silver being the big bad. So they could very well go the route of him kind of retreating back to that spot where he's done with everything and ready to make a new life. They could very well go that route. I don't know if that would be the best storytelling. I have absolute faith in the writers that would be well written. I don't know. I don't know exactly what they'll do with Silver. I don't know what makes most sense for Silver, if he's indeed in season 6 any. The biggest question mark is, of course, if Julie will make an appearance. Of course, Hilary Swank's character. I think that she will, but I don't think it's going to be some like major role. I think that if anything, she'll have a cameo. And I think it will lead into the Karate Kid movie. It's a prediction that may well not come true, but I think that we will see Julie Pierce interact with Daniel, and I think that that could lead to the Karate Kid movie. I think, there's a very popular theory about the series ending with Johnny and Carmen getting married. I think that's possible. I think it's possible we may see their baby. Also, just another note, just speaking of their baby, that scene where the baby is kicking, and of course we know it's a girl. Whenever the baby is kicking and Carmen tells Johnny that she's kicking, the look of pure joy on his face whenever he heard his baby was kicking, I thought that was hilarious. Overall, I love part 1 of season 6 of Cobra Kai. I think it sets up very nicely. And another note that I noticed on one of the flags for the teams represented was potentially a throwback to the reboot of The Karate Kid from 2010. Now I have to look back and see what the dojo name was for the antagonist in that Karate Kid movie. But I believe it was the same dojo. So I think that that could lead into the Karate Kid movie if we see the dojo from that Karate Kid movie. And honestly, I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate if we saw Jackie Chan. I don't think that Jackie Chan was the sensei of that dojo, but if that dojo is indeed in Cobra Kai, then it's possible we could see Jackie Chan. And I wouldn't mind seeing that dojo either. The only complaint that I would have, or the only concern, would be the fact that in that Karate Kid movie it was Kung Fu and not karate. And looking it up again, at the end of the Karate Kid movie with Jackie Chan in it, it says that the Fighting Dragon students bow to Han, accepting him as their new master. So if the Fighting Dragon dojo is in Cobra Kai, it will be Jackie Chan as their sensei, which is fucking incredible. So that is a possibility. I think I saw that flag. I may have been mistaken. But that is my review of Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 1. Overall, I'm going to rate it 4 out of 5. The reason it's not a perfect 5 out of 5 is because there were certain things that I felt could have been a hair better. Not like any fault of actors or writers or production or anything. Mostly the Miyagi secret, which, as I said now several minutes ago, how it ties into the Sekai Taikai. Daniel discovers that Miyagi was a Sekai Taikai captain because in that same box there was a captain headband that had blood on it. So it's why I'm giving it 4 out of 5 for now. But if they go the route that I'm thinking, I can easily see that becoming a 5 out of 5. Because my theory is that Miyagi accidentally killed someone in the Sekai Taikai. I feel like it was around the time, around the general time period of the robbery and then him fleeing. So that's my theory for now. I'm very curious to see how this will come into play. All of that being said, get your asses on Netflix, watch Cobra Kai, watch Season 6 Part 1, and let us know what you think in the comments below. If you've stuck around this long, I thank you, and stay tuned because we have a ton more killer content coming out soon. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
We have been the Cinema Asylum Podcast. You guys were awesome. Thanks for coming out. Good night.